Red Gold and Bold podcast is back at it here on a Friday. Remember, if you're catching us live, you can catch us in the stream, or if you're catching, by the podcast, you can be a part of the conversation and catch us live on the stream. We do it Fridays, normally at 10. We're a little bit early. We appreciate everybody changing their schedule to be with us at 9 o'clock. We're going to talk Chiefs offense. Does it have the ability now to get back into the top five? If not, what's left to work on? How do the Chiefs unlock that elite passing game that we haven't seen for a couple of years? Do you believe the offensive line has come together? What's a realistic expectation for the receiving core for the Chiefs? Plus some big contracts handed out. Jaycee Horn got a big deal with the Carolina Panthers. Myles Garrett with the Cleveland Browns. What does this mean for Trent McDuffie, for George Karlaftis? We're breaking that down. DK Metcalf getting a big fat deal. What will that mean ultimately for Rashee Rice? We're talking about it right here, right now on the Red Gold and Bold podcast.
You are listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell is a columnist for the Kansas City Star. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. We are off and running here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, Soren Petro with you. And can this Chiefs offense, is everything that they have done this offseason equal them getting back into being a top five offense, Jeff? Is it all fixed and they're ready to be elite? Let's start that word early here. By the way, welcome to season 5 of the Red, Gold, and Bold. With the NFL year comes a new year for us. This will be season 5 of the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. So first of all, welcome to everybody and for all the folks there in the chat room that have been here for a long time. But let's talk about getting into the top 5 of offensive rankings. Does this offense have the ability to get back to being elite with what they've done, Jeff?
Well, it always has the ability with the play caller and the quarterback, but right now, yeah, I think it's still up in the air as to where they're going to be. Like last year, they got capsized by injury, so that you have to take that into account. The year before, there was a lot of drops and inconsistency at the receiver position. They changed out some of those guys. Most of those guys are gone now. And so, yeah, I think it depends on, one, how good the supporting cast is around Patrick Mahomes, obviously, but 2, it depends on how defenses are going to play them. And I know that it's so exciting to think about the way things were back in 2020, in those days when they had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce in his prime, but those days are now over. And what you're dealing with is a league that's had 4 or 5 years to build rosters and defenses and get coaching strategies in place to deal with what the Chiefs were doing. And so I don't know if it's going to be easy for anybody to put up the kind of numbers that they put up. You look at the Bills offense, for example, they were not a prolific passing game. They had a really good offense, but it wasn't a ton of passing yards that fueled it. And so I think the Chiefs, if they want to be a top 5 offense, they're probably going to have to start looking at what other teams are doing and injecting more of the run game into what they're doing.
How about you, Sam? Do you think this work this offseason adds up to them being a top 5 offense again?
Look, I mean, Jeff's right that it's up in the air. I mean, I lean towards no as of right now. I mean, I think we need to remind ourselves that they weren't close to a top 5 offense last year. They were 15th in points and 16th in yards a year after being 15th in points and 9th in yards. Like, they've been an average offense for the last couple of years now. Now, they've been good in the crucial moments of games, and I don't just mean fourth quarter. I mean third downs, fourth downs. and then, late in games as well. So that ability, I think, is still in there. I do think you'll see maybe a better concentration throughout a whole game when you lose the Super Bowl as opposed to coming off a couple wins. But Jeff said it. I mean, it's about how they're played, but then how they respond to it. I don't think there's any mystery in how the Chiefs are going to be played this year. I think we know how the Chiefs are going to be played this year. The mystery is, can they figure out how to counter that? And Jeff mentioned that, the running game is one thing. They did try that last year. They didn't have great running backs a year ago. Their running backs were performed at a below average level last year. One of their answers was getting Rashee Rice the ball quickly because he's terrific after the catch, even in traffic. So much of their offense is after the catch stuff in space. He's good after the catch in traffic still. And that was a good solution for them. And then it disappeared because he was out and they didn't have any replacement for that bubble screen action or anything of that sort. They stopped running that play altogether. So I think that they do have some solutions, but they still haven't unlocked parts of the game that forces they haven't had good enough solutions to force people to play them differently. And so if they're going to be a top 5 offense, as much as people look at the personnel and the tweaks, I should say, that they've made in this first week of free agency, to me, what's way more important is what the coaches are doing. What's the scheme evaluation during, these last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I can't echo that sentiment anymore. That's as I was kind of chewing on our topics today. That's as I look back, because 3 years ago, they lost Tyreek Hill and they had the number 1 offense in football, right? So there was schematically, they were still ahead of the game, even with lesser talent. Now, I don't think that you just say, okay, well, we can keep taking talent away and we'll just scheme past it. They need better talent, right? And I think the left tackle spot is a big one. I don't want to whistle past that one. That was a big problem last year. I think bigger than people realize. And I always stress, if you can't convert third down, that's not just the 4 yards you didn't get to get a first down. That's all the yards you might have gotten afterwards had you gotten the first down. A new set of downs, maybe then you get to the magic play that was going to get 25 or 30. And, converting on third down is important. Not even getting to third down, just constantly moving the change is an important part of the equation. And, and when you have problems at left tackle, you're constantly penalizing yourself. It gets harder to do those things. So I think there is an element that if they would solve left tackle, I think the offense will take a big jump. To your point, Sam, you said they weren't even close. They were 15. I think it was in yards last year.
15th in points, 16th in yards.
16th in yards, yeah. 15 in points, 16 in yards. So I think they could take a big jump. If Jalen Moore would be everything they possibly think he could be, right? Which my hope is Donovan Smith plus health, right? If you could get to there. And I think the ceiling would be that he'd be better than Donovan Smith, but I don't think the ceiling is Pro Bowl. I don't think anyone thinks he's going to be a Pro Bowler, or he would have emerged for the 49ers. But if you can get Donovan Smith caliber play, then I think they will bump up a little bit, right? And I think that helps a lot. But I think the big question they've got to be asking themselves, and it's a hard one to ask, especially when you've been, tons of praise, Jeff, has been heaped on you about you're the genius and are you the, it's Andy Reid. It's Matt Nagy. I mean, they got to be asking, are we missing the obvious answer here for how you beat these shell defenses? And it's on us that we have not come up with what the answer is. And I think that is the most difficult question to ask, because I think when you have always had the answer, usually the answer is somewhere else, right? Is the answer, I'll ask it again and people hate it. It is a question. It is not a statement. So don't Tommy stick it if you're going to come firing at me that I'm making a statement. Is the game starting to move past Andy Reid? Is that a bigger part of the problem than anybody at Arrowhead wants to admit?
I wouldn't say it's moving past him. I believe he's just stubborn in how he wants to operate. And every great offensive mind, by the way, is stubborn in how they want to operate. I've never seen an offensive coach who had great success. Whether these are guys who had great success one place and couldn't create it somewhere else, or guys who had it throughout their career. I think about guys like Brian Billick, who had a great offense in Minnesota. I think about guys like John Gruden, who had great offenses. And once they lost players, they still wanted to keep doing stuff, and they still wanted to think they could still out-scheme people. It comes with the job. But, yeah, I think Andy Reid is not so much about passing it by. It's about embracing the times. And if you look at the top 8 teams that were left playing football in this last year's playoffs, most of them had really good run games or really good running backs. And that's not a coincidence. As much as we want to laud Jaden Daniels, they had a really good run game in Washington. You saw what the run game meant to Philadelphia. You saw what it meant to Lamar Jackson. You saw what it meant to Josh Allen. And for whatever reason, Andy and his staff still believe, oh, we can just out-scheme people. And that's partly because of the quarterback. You know, you have a guy like Patrick Mahomes, you want to do all these things, but ultimately you have to make it easier on him. And I just don't. That to me is the key. You want to get people out of running too high, run the football down their throat. That's how you do it. There's no mystery to that, and that's where they have to get to.
Sam, you mentioned the running game, and Jeff did. Is that the only way? Is part of this that they've got to get back to the drawing board and change some things? I mean, I think everybody would agree, starting with everyone in the Chiefs' offensive brain trust, that they had a bad plan against Philadelphia. Right, that didn't work. They also had problems on the offensive line. Put those two things together and add Patrick Mahomes having a tough day, and you get your ass kicked. That's what happened there. Okay, that's solved. But how do they go back to taking their part of the equation and not making a mistake?
I just think it's not a simple answer. I mean, if this was as simple as like, hey, just run the ball more, I think the Chiefs would have done it. The Chiefs did that last year. I mean, they became a run-first team after Rashee Rice went down. And I judge that based on the fact they ran the ball on first down more than they passed it for like an 8-week stretch. And they had never done that in the tenure of Patrick Mahomes. But you've got to have good running backs. Like their running backs don't hit the hole quick enough.
Yeah.
I mentioned that Rashee Rice, getting quick screens to him was part of their solution. And he was really good for the first 3 weeks. I mean, he was leading the NFL in receiving, or it was either catches or yards. The other one, he was second or third. But like that was part of the solution. And then you've got to have diversification in your routes too. I mean, you can't, it became clear at some point that opposing defenses expected certain players to be running certain routes, and that those routes weren't the full complement of the route tree for every player. And so the unpredictability has got to return to the offense as well. And I don't mean that in terms of trick plays and, gadget stuff and shocking a defense. I just mean, there's enough in your tool bag to where they can't expect what's coming.
Yeah. How about, additions they can make? Is there anything left, Jeff, on the market? I mean, we know they're going to get a shot at the draft and what they're going to do there. Most of us expect them to go defensive line early, maybe even often in that draft. But is there anything they can do when it comes to adding personnel offensively to get better?
Oh, I think you have to get, I'm going to be beating this drum throughout this segment. You have to get a running back who's dynamic and explosive and a player in the passing game. And those guys are going to be in abundance in this draft because you can find those guys in the second, third, and fourth round. I think about the guy from Ohio State, Quinshawn Judkins is an example of that kind of player. But, you look at, going back to the Philadelphia reference I made, people talked about their passing game, but Saquon Barkley had so many explosive plays as runs that explosive plays count no matter how they happen. Jahmyr Gibbs for the Detroit Lions had explosive play. It means a lot when you can just throw the ball out to a guy 4 or 5 yards away from the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage, and he can go 25 yards with it. And that is, I think, key to what they have to do. And then they have to find a developmental left tackle. I get tired of hearing, well, if you're not in the top 10 picks, you're not getting a great left tackle. Well, you can develop them. The guy who plays for Philadelphia, Jordan Mailata, came through their international program. And he was a rugby player. Granted, that's a rare thing to happen, but you have to find who has the traits. Let's coach him up. Let's see what we can do with that guy. If you're going to play this game of, every year we're going to be looking for a left tackle.
They tried the rugby route.
Yeah,
with a kick returner. That's right. Is that guy still around?
He's still. He finished the year, I think, on the Jaguars practice squad.
Okay, all right.
Figures. Yeah, Doug Peterson. Goes to another Andy Reid guy. Yeah, sure. Let's give this a try. Let's see what happens here. Yeah. How about it? Running back. I know you've been beating that drum for a while, Sam. As far as adding somebody, that is, is that what's the final piece of the puzzle for this team? I mean, yes, go get Jonathan Ogden in his prime. Okay, we're all on board with if a left tackle falls out of the sky, great. But realistically, is that the one thing that they on offense haven't addressed, right? Or are we Elijah Mitchell going to be your guy?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, you could certainly throw in a lot of different skill sets that I would say this offense could use. Left tackle, a better, left tackle, more certainty at left guard. You could always use another wide receiver because I think there's uncertainty for different reasons around all three of their wide receivers. You could use a tight end. But really what's most realistic, I think, that you can get, and Jeff mentioned it in the draft, is a running back. And for me, it's even more specifically a guy who can make plays in the passing game, because they didn't have that last year. And I talked about that throughout training camp, that was an issue that I looked at and said, where's this Jerick McKinnon role? Because to me, it's not the designed pass that does you the benefit here. We've seen that when Patrick Mahomes is scrambling, when he runs the ball, he's effective. But when he's scrambling lately, and they have this shell defense, and it used to be this, he extends plays and you've got to always be ready. A lot of that was the deep stuff. Like, that was their outlet. That's been taken away. Like, teams know he wants to throw the ball deep when he's on the move. So where is the outlet in that case? And it long was the running back with Darrell Williams, with Jerick McKinnon. And so to me, that's got to return to part of the offense. And the Chiefs believe this as well. Everything I just said, the Chiefs believe that as well. But the running back class is extraordinarily deep this year. I mentioned this last year when people asked me, why did they re-sign Clyde Edwards-Helaire? And I said, this is kicking the can down the road at running back for a year, because that next year's draft class, which is now a month away, is really strong. But you've got to get one in that draft. Now, the question is, and I'm interested in what Jeff thinks of this too, because he's got this as his priority, is how early are you willing to expend a pick on a draft? Because I still wouldn't take a first or second round pick on a running back, but there are going to be third and fourth round talents out there.
Well, and I think that's the key, isn't it, Jeff? Is like, what happens to the market, right? Because I think when Saquon Barkley has all that success, Derrick Henry was successful moving over, I think the price of running backs went up. It's unfortunate for the Chiefs. It would have been great if the price of running backs were at an all-time low, which they might have been last year, when the Giants are walking away from Saquon Barkley and, all those things, and then have a really thick running back class and you get one late. Now the price is up. There are a lot of them, but we're talking about, I'll bet probably two of them go. Ashton Jetty's going to go in the first round. I think the kid from North Carolina is going to go in the first round. And then if everyone's like, well, we got to have that, we got to have our guy like that, are you forced to go up into the second round to get one of the guys that can do all the things we're talking about?
I don't think so, because as much as they need a running back, and I think they know that too, they're not going to use them at the same volume as an Ashton Jeanty, right? And so it's like you don't really feel compelled to, going into it that we're not going to go crazy with how we use this guy, so we can be more focused on the skill set as opposed to the volume and how much we're going to, can this guy handle the pounding? But yeah, I think that I'm not adverse to a second round pick if it's somebody who can help you and really be a productive player for you. People are laughing at the Lions when they took Jahmyr Gibbs 12th overall and traded up to get him. Worked out pretty well for him, And so I don't see a problem with that. I think Josh Jacobs was in the 20s when the Raiders drafted him. The thing, again, I go back to is Andy Reid and Matt Nagy and those guys over there, are they going to embrace where the league is going with this? Because to me, what's notable is that a lot of these teams last year figured it out. And Saquon Barkley was available. Josh Jacobs was available. These guys, the Chiefs could have had these guys if they wanted to have them, but they had no use for them, right? In the way they were operating their offense.
They had no money for them.
Yeah. Either. Well, I'm just saying, like, someone along those lines, Joe Mixon, for example, or someone like that. They could have gone and gotten somebody who had a name and still had value, and that these other teams were jumping on board these guys. Now, forget it. I think Baltimore was an outlier because I think they needed to have something for specifically what they do offensively. But teams were coming around to the idea of running backs have a lot more value than they used to have, and the Chiefs were late to the game on this.
Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs did pan out. I know the Chiefs really liked him, but he ended up going way beyond. They weren't going to move up to get him. But there's also plenty of running backs that go up high that don't end up panning out. And that's the thing. And people are kind of forgetting about that because so few go high. But now when they have gone high, they are uber elite. And, Bijan Robinson has gone high and looks very good for the Atlanta Falcons. But there was a time when a lot of running backs would go high and you'd get Curtis Enos, right? You would get guys that just weren't that good. We'll talk about making the passing game elite. Part of it is, as Sam said, getting a pass-catching running back. I will go into more detail on that after you hear from our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warning. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Northland Injury Law, Kansas City's Google 5-star rated personal injury lawyers, serving KC for more than 40 years, voted Kansas City's #1 accident lawyers, helping people with serious injuries from car accidents, work accidents, falls, and other personal injuries. Northland Injury Law doesn't get paid unless they get money for their client. Don't wait, get compensated now. If you have a case, text HURT to 22222. That's HURT to 22222 or call 816-400-HURT. That's 816-400-4878. The choice of a lawyer is an important one and should not be based solely upon advertisements. All right, let's talk about it. Unlocking an elite passing offense. How do they do it, Jeff? What are some of the things that have to happen to make it, where they can really win with the passing game?
Well, I think one, and this probably sounds like heresy, but you have to understand that you can't put everything on your quarterback. Like this was the year when I think, the last couple of years, to be honest with you, when Patrick Mahomes can't make everything right. And that has to be where you start foundationally. Because when you start that way, then you begin to craft an offense that allows for some variance, some margin for error where he doesn't have to be making miraculous plays for it to all work. Two, I'd like to have more, and I've said this in the past too, I'd like to have better receivers and less reliance on scheming things up. See Hollywood Brown. It baffles me how a team like the Green Bay Packers can have an abundance of young receivers lying around. Now, not a number one out there, but they can have 6 or 7 guys, and as the Chiefs go down their depth chart, the guys who are like the Justin Rosses and Nico Remigios and Justin Watsons and Mecole Hardman can't really have a lot of value for you. I think that to Sam's point about the predictability, I think that they've gotten really top heavy with their receivers. And so once you get beyond the top 2 or 3 guys, I think teams know what the other guys are going to do when they go those personnel packages. And then finally, you have to block it up. You've got to run a scheme that allows for you to be able to protect your quarterback better. And that means changing how you want to handle left tackle or block for left tackle or cheat. You can't have five guys out every time you want to throw a pass. And so I think that would all that stuff would help.
Well, and maybe not, put your guy in shotgun and tell your left tackle you're on an island all the time, right? Maybe get your quarterback under center, maybe bootleg, maybe have some other elements of it. I mean, it might be time for Andy Reid to shift away from what he's doing. That's where I come back to what we were talking about earlier. I do think that there are things, when you watch the Super Bowl, he was under duress and there was nobody who had their head around looking at him. None of his receivers were in a position like, hey, here's the route we run when when our quarterback's in trouble. And that might've been a little bit different if you'd play action, if you'd roll a pocket. And so there are some things they could do schematically. I definitely think that's a part of it. Sam, where do you sit on, unlocking a little bit more of the offensive potential, the passing game potential?
Yeah. I think the Chiefs have better receivers than the Packers do. Like, I wouldn't trade the Chiefs wide receivers for the Packers group, but I think, when I mentioned
just before you move off that, and I'll give Jeff the chance, because I think Jeff's point wasn't that the top end, it was
the
that
depth of it.
Yeah. Like instead of having guys that, let's be clear, are not NFL players, like Nico Remigio might be an NFL kick returner, but Justin Ross, come on. You've tried this long enough. He's been available. Nobody's gotten him.
He was on the practice. He was on the practice squad all year. I mean,
we go to training camp, and that's one of the guys we're talking about. I mean, it is just,
not this podcast.
No, but I mean that. But there's nobody. The best chance to have any ceiling left are guys that have ultimately proven to be they're not NFL players. They're guys like you go in. No, there's no ceiling with Justin Watson. He is what he is, right? I think that's the point. And I think what I would say is they've been chasing that offensive line spot. This is where you see drafting 4 offensive linemen in 2 years and none of them starting. This is where it starts to add up, because if you'd gotten it right with Wanya Morris, right, you maybe take one more offensive lineman because you're looking for the guard to replace Trey Smith or Joe Tooney when they're gone. But they've invested 4 picks and none of those guys could solidify. And that's, if one of them gets it done, that's 3 other picks to go elsewhere. I mean, we lived through this with them going D tackle all the time. And all of a sudden you looked around, you're like, oh, Tony Gonzalez is old. Wow, Priest Holmes is hurt. Wow, Willie Rofe has retired. Brian Waters is an expensive free agent. Will Shields is 34 years old. What the hell happened to our offense? You drafted D tackles 54 times, right? And so I think, wide receiver, a lot of them get on the field. You need to, it's not quite, offensive lineman. You should probably take an offensive lineman every year because 5 of them start, 5 of your 22 starters are O-linemen. But receivers, you get 3 and 4 of them out there. And if we kind of call pass catching tight end and push that in there, and to your point, Sam, even a running back that can catch the ball, they're not getting to those things. And you're getting, reclamation projects like Samaje Perine and, those kind of guys, and, Justin Ross's and undrafted guys, instead of getting somebody that was, taking a shot at the 6 at Puka Nacua.
Yeah, I mean, they drafted a 1st-round wide receiver last year, 2nd round the year before, 2nd round the year before. Like they put draft resources.
That's fair. That's the problem is that previous attempts have not delivered, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, but I think you've got to change the way that you want Patrick Mahomes. I shouldn't say change. I should say add to the ways that you ask Patrick Mahomes to operate the offense. And one of them, Soren, you mentioned it, like not everything has to be under shotgun. The Chiefs were very effective when they passed out of under center plays last year. One of the top 5 teams in passing on an expected points added basis and under center plays last year. Like, to me, that's got to become part of your offense, moving him intentionally as far as rolling out in the pocket. Like, I don't think they take advantage enough of the way Patrick Mahomes can move outside the pocket on purpose, not because of the pressure, but because that's the way the play is designed. And I'm thinking of, I've mentioned this a couple times, but the Rams put Matthew Stafford on the move a lot, and he is significantly less mobile than the quarterback in Kansas City, but they just believe that in the play design. And I think the Chiefs should put Patrick, again, this is additive, not replacement. But I think that's got to be part of it. I think you have to not just say you're going to throw the ball deep. You actually have to prove you're willing to do it. After an off season of all they talked about was unlocking the downfield passing game. It was stressed to Patrick Mahomes in practice. They threw 63 of them in 23. They only threw 46 of them in 2024. Like they're almost a 20% decrease in the amount of attempts they actually. You've got to do it. I'm thinking of a play where Xavier Worthy's lined up one-on-one with Quinyon Mitchell in the first half of the Super Bowl. One-on-one, you got to be willing to give your guys a chance to make a play sometimes. If you had a top 5 offense, that would not be an expected value positive return play. When your offense is middle of the road, those chances suddenly become worth the gamble, and you've got to have the willingness to take those risks.
Well, I think part of that is, like, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, that's the point about running the ball, is to pull one of the safeties out of there, right? Like a lot of where Mahomes is going with the ball is, okay, I've run the motion, here it is, their man here, and there's 2 guys still back there. And so I can't just put it out there and give a guy a chance to make a play 1-on-2. You've got to create 1-on-1. I'm with you. And in that play, I'm not arguing that play. I don't even, the play you're talking about, I will take your word for it. Your eye is very good at finding those things. But there is part of what Patrick Mahomes does that things come off the board based upon what he sees pre-snap. And if pre-snap is, go ahead, dink and dunk underneath with Travis Kelce's old ass all day. We'll let you have that. We're not getting beat over the top. I am with you. Like, there are ways to do it, and they have to do it. But I think it gets easier, Jeff, if you can pull one of those defensive backs up the field and trying to stop the either underneath passing game or better, the running game. Because it now – and here's the thought, play action. And I don't know that you can play action effectively out of the –
slow down. Oh, pump the brakes over there, man. Like, you're getting crazy with this. Play action. Oh, jeez. Look, it's all true. Like, the fallacy in football in general is that if you have a great quarterback and you have a fast receiver, you can throw the ball deep whenever you want. And that's just not true. You have to find a way to manipulate the defense. And the way the Eagles played these guys, the Eagles played these guys the same way a lot of teams played them. They just played it at a higher level, which is to say, as Soren said, we know you want to throw the football deep. We know Andy wants to do that. We know they're not going to stick with the run. We know their running backs suck. And so we'll take our chances with some of that short stuff. We'll take our chances with the run game because we know you want to get back to that anyway. And so maybe it's a rewiring of the mindset we're talking about here. Less just not just scheming and personnel. It's just the idea of you're going to have to attack other parts of the field for this offense to unlock its true potential now. And part of the issue here is that the part of the field they need to attack is filled with a guy who's about to be 36 years old and doesn't run very well anymore.
Sam, is the offensive line coming together?
I think we're going to be talking about the offensive line on a pretty regular basis throughout next season. I mean, look, their left tackle situation, it cannot be worse than it was last year. And like, I know, what was it? Clint Hurdle that said, "Don't say it can't get worse." I'm going to say
it was Buddy Bell.
Buddy Bell. I'm going to
say
Buddy Bell. Yeah. I'm going to say it can't get worse. Like, I can't imagine a left tackle situation that could be worse. I mean, you benched a rookie in week 2, you bench Wanya Morris, and when the quarterback for whatever the Chiefs say, we know what the quarterback was yelling to the sideline. All of a sudden, the left tackle's out of the game, and now you're moving a left guard to left tackle. And I'm telling you, it did not solve left tackle. All it did was create a problem at left guard. That's the reason why the Chiefs couldn't run the ball first anymore, was because their solid left guard was no longer there. So you've got to, I think their left tackle is going to be better. And I don't actually know all that much about Jalen Moore because the 49ers didn't give us all that much to know about him over the last 4 years. But you're going to be worse at left guard. And I think, you'll there's no reason to expect that your other 3 guys will be better or worse, other than I will point out Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Juwan Taylor have been pretty healthy, over the last few years. And, banking on health at offensive line is tough. I mean, look at what the Texans went through a year ago when, they were missing 3 starters against the Chiefs and then 2 others got hurt in that game that they actually played the Chiefs. Like, that happens with offensive linemen. And I do think the Chiefs still need to address this position in the draft, even if they think they have their 5 starters.
Yeah, see the Super Bowl against the Bucs, right? That's exactly what ended up happening to the Kansas City Chiefs. And yes, I think you're right. And I think there's also an element where we are now sitting here and we've come to grips with the idea that, okay, they're going to make changes on the left side. And so now it's not a shock to the system. Okay, there's a chance Joe Thuney's going to be gone. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's fine. We knew that was happening. Yes, but you're worse, right? I think you made it clear. I want to underscore what Sam said. You're worse at left guard. So you have to get better at left tackle. You have to get better. Otherwise, you're backing up. And then if you do have a couple of injuries, I think it's a great point. Then all of a sudden, you're in some big trouble. All right, let's take a break here. We'll come back. We'll talk about what's realistic to expect for the receivers next. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty, Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot.
Besame Wellness for all your cannabis needs. With fast, easy, and discreet delivery, you can enjoy the same deals you enjoy in-store but delivered to your home or office. Even same day. Restrictions may apply. Any questions? Let Besame's top-rated customer service team assist you. And this Chief season, don't miss a minute of the game with no delivery fees on game days. And when the home team wins, so do you. Use promo code 3PEAT and receive some extra free goodies with your next Besame order. Don't forget, you can still use promo code podcast25 to save 25% on your entire order for online delivery or at any of their 5 area Besame locations.
All right, let's discuss the receiving core. Rashee Rice coming off an injury, a suspension looming over his head. So that means he'll be away from the team for a while, away from the meetings, the practices, and theoretically the chemistry of the team. Travis Kelce turning 36 in October, likely his final season. Hollywood Brown. Last year, overall, playoffs included, 14 for 141 was what they were able to get out of him. Year 2 for Xavier Worthy, but still questions about what kind of durability he has if you increase the workload there. And then, by the way, I think that's it, right? That here. No, let me add in Noah Gray at the tight end spot. Robert Tonyan, if you want to put into the mix at tight end. What's a really realistic expectation for the receiving core, Jeff?
Well, it's tricky because there's a lot of different variables there. I was trying to, as part of this exercise, trying to find a receiving core that would compare to them. Obviously, they're a little bit better than what the Bills can offer. But I think if you're having a receiving core that has the variety that they had in their offense, that's a positive. And the key here, I just had Rashee Rice is the obvious key here. Like, what's he going to be coming off injury, and how much can he offer with whatever suspension he ends up having? Because I think all these other guys are going to be impacted positively or negatively by his absence. And that includes Travis. And so what I hope is that you're able to see him take a huge step forward, expand on what we saw in the first couple of weeks before he got hurt last season. And then Travis is not the second option, probably the third or fourth option on most days, and that Xavier Worthy is able to ascend from there. I don't have huge hopes for Hollywood Brown. Shouldn't be a surprise for anybody, but I think he can be more productive if those other 3 things happen. So I think best case scenario is you have Rashee Rice being a player who ends up catching, I don't know, maybe 50 balls, depending on his suspension. Xavier Worthy becomes 800-yard receiver. Travis is in the 600 to 700 range, and Hollywood Brown catches 40 passes. If they do that, that's a pretty good receiving core.
Sam, Birdie told me you were calling for 2,000 from Hollywood Brown. That seems excessive to me, but okay. Bold and daring. I do look forward to the bold and daring commentary when it comes up. But how about it? What are your expectations for the receiving core?
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be better than they were a year ago. I actually think it's one of the spots where the Chiefs could make the most improvement from the start of 24 to the start of 25. I think Rashee Rice is a number 1 wide receiver. I think Xavier Worthy figured some things out to where you could expect. Jeff mentioned 800. I think that sounds like a reasonable expectation for Xavier Worthy, that he gets between 800 to 900 yards. But again, I'll stress he stayed healthy for 17 games. And, we all questioned whether or not he'd be able to stay healthy through the course of an NFL season. So I think that's always going to be a question mark. I think, Hollywood Brown's a question mark for the same reason. I like Hollywood Brown as a 3rd wide receiver. But I think you've got questions about all 3 of the wide receivers for different reasons. Rashee Rice, how many games is he going to miss for suspension? Xavier Worthy, we all said this on the last podcast. The NFL will conduct its own investigation with him. And then Hollywood Brown is his health. I think the least certain thing is that every year from here on out that Travis Kelce plays, which is probably just one more, you're going to have to expect a little bit less than you got the year before. If Travis Kelce puts up, 900 yards, or especially if he puts up 1,000 yards, I'll be stunned, because it's never been done by a tight end at his age. And that's not at all a knock on Travis Kelce. It's just literally the historical evidence at the position that you're going to have to, this is a year where you need to transition to somebody else leading your team in receiving. because you can't rely on it being Travis Kelce, because it shouldn't be a 36-year-old tight end.
And it was let me look at 23. Did Kelce lead in 23? Or did Rashee Rice already take that mantle from him?
They were both in the they're both under 1,000, more than 900 though, right?
Yes, 984 for Kelce, 938 for Rashee Rice. But I think your point is pretty good, and I think you would expect Rashee Rice to be that guy were he there for all the games. I will just offer up 165 pounds for Xavier Worthy, 180 pounds for Hollywood Brown. The rest of the NFL seems to be getting bigger, and Andy Reid keeps going for guys that can flat out run. That's great. I mean, it seemed like he, felt like, I'll get you open. You just need to run away from guys. And I'll go back to the first point. Is he still getting them open? Or if you're asking him to go win wrestling matches with bigger DBs, then you need to get bigger receivers. And so Rashee Rice is that guy, right? But Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy are a couple of smaller receivers. And I think it would be nice to have another big receiver to just win on a slant, right? We saw Hollywood Brown do it a little bit. They did it early in the Super Bowl. You're like, okay, here we go. I've beaten that drum for a while. Rashee Rice is the guy that really makes that thing go because he's big enough and physical enough to run through some arms, to chop down that arm, turn and get his body around, shield his body, extend the arms, create a little bit of separation from that DB. You're smaller and, lean like those guys. I think they might need to look at what type of wide receiver they're getting and not just value the stopwatch so much.
Let me ask you, because this is the reason I mentioned that, this can't be a year where Travis Kelce leads you in receiving. Every year that Patrick Mahomes has played, there's only been two different leading receivers, pass catchers, Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. That's it. Those are the only guys in his 6 years of starting that have led, in 7 years of starting that have led in receiving. Does somebody else lead this team in receiving this year? And I think yes. I think Rashee Rice, let's say he misses 4 games. I think 4 games or fewer, he leads the team in wide receiver in receiving, but he misses half the season. Are you looking at Travis Kelce leading your team in receiving as a 36-year-old tight end?
I think the more important question for this team, because we've seen them win on the road in the playoffs 2 years ago, I think the more important question is who leads them in yards per game the last 8 weeks, right? Like, I think your point is 100% valid, but instead of worrying about whether or not Rashee Rice can get to a few more yards, like at the end of 2 years ago, Rashee Rice was the number one target, right? Travis Kelce beat him on total yards because the first half of the year, Rashee Rice wasn't really up to speed, being a rookie and everything. I think, he's going to be suspended. He's going to be out for a while. The key is, do they have a go-to guy that yards per game is, and by the way, not beating him by 2 yards, like definitively is the number one guy, right? I think that would satisfy your question, would it not, Sam?
Yeah. I mean, look, Xavier Worthy had more yards than Travis Kelce over the final 7 games of last year. But it was marginally so. They both were under 400 yards in receiving. Like, I'm talking about a guy who can be your third down option when you've got to have something, when you're designing something up for somebody, you say, it's this guy. This is the guy we want to try and make a play on third down here.
And Sam brings up a good point about just, look, I think if Travis Kelce catches 97 passes this year, it's not going to be a successful offense. I think that he has to take a step back, and it's a really hard thing to do.
All right, let me rephrase that. Somebody else has to take a step forward.
Yeah, step forward. Yeah. But that's also on Patrick Mahomes. Like, I think back when I covered the 49ers early in my career and Terrell Owens was becoming a star, he used to complain behind the scenes like, Steve Young still wants to throw the football to Brett Jones, the old tight end who was Steve Young's security blanket forever. And that's, quarterbacks fall in love with certain guys. Obviously Tom Brady loved Rob Gronkowski, and Patrick Mahomes in big moments looks for Travis Kelce. That has to change this coming season. Not just the overall stats. You saw it with the Super Bowl a couple of years ago when Rashee Rice went nuts on the sideline because he was throwing the ball to Kelce. It's like he's going to have to break that trend for this offense to unlock itself too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. A couple of contracts were signed. Jaycee Horn gets 4 for $100 million with $70 million guaranteed. We'll get to Myles Garrett here in a second, but I want to point something out. According to the PFF grades, they're not the end-all be-all, but they're at least an effort by theoretically unbiased people to grade NFL players. Trent McDuffie was the 3rd best overall corner and 9th best in coverage. Jaycee Horn, according to PFF, was the 86th best corner the 136th best corner in coverage, and he was given 4 for 100. I don't know if Eric Eager's watching today, but boy, I'd like to hear the explanation on this one. He did play better in the second half than he did the first half, but he has missed a ton of games. I think the underreported story is how much money was given to Jaycee Horn and what that does to the cornerback market, Jeff. He did not deserve this contract, but that doesn't matter. Agents are going to put that on the board and say, here we go. Here's the discussion. And furthermore, it bodes well for the Chiefs in a fifth year. Maybe not well if Trent McDuffie hates it so much that he's going to hold out going into the fifth year. McDuffie's only getting $13 million in his year 5 year because while being all pro, which is better than Pro Bowl, he wasn't Pro Bowl either of the last 2 years, and it's going to cost him $7 million in that fifth year. Those two things, what does that mean for Trent McDuffie long-term in a Chiefs uniform?
Well, he's going to get a big payday at some point, obviously. But I agree with you that that contract blew my mind when I saw it, and no one really questioned it outside of maybe Carolina because it's the Panthers and nobody cares about the Panthers. But to say he's one of the top 3, it's him, Patrick Surtain, and Jalen Ramsey are the guys who've been paid that level of money, and he just doesn't fit that equation. And so you start not just McDuffie, you start talking about him, but you're talking about Sauce Gardner, you're talking about Derek Stingley Jr. If these guys get deals done before McDuffie gets done, yeah, you're probably talking about $30 million a year or plus for a cornerback. And what it says to me is it makes it a lot harder for the other part of this conversation with George Karlaftis to have a real future here, because at some point that money gets crazy at that position. And we've said this before, when you're paying all these non-premium positions, those premium positions come up, that price tag is startling. So yeah, I think it's a huge deal down the road for the Chiefs and McDuffie.
What do you see when you look at that contract, Sam?
I see the floor for Trent McDuffie. I mean, Trent McDuffie is going to be signing later, and I do think he's a better player. He's a more versatile player too. I think we'll see Trent McDuffie play, back to the combination of the outside and the slot. And I really think he was one of the absolute best slot cornerbacks in football 2 years ago. He was rated as the best in terms of he was the first team All-Pro guy there. Like, he's got accolades that Horn does not. So I see it as the floor for Trent McDuffie. Like, that's where the conversation needs to surpass. So yeah, he's going to be a remarkably expensive player to retain. And I just want to underscore what Jeff said. Like, this is why I critique contracts like the Nick Bolton contract, because these other contracts are coming down the pike and they are at the positions that you need to have be successful on your roster.
How about this one? The Philadelphia Eagles went in and gave Devonta Smith a first-round pick, who they had a fifth-year option on, a 3-year, $75 million extension. At this time in Trent McDuffie's career, they went in and gave him that extension. And they got him locked up for what amounts to $25 million per year. Now, when they gave him that, I'm like, for like a 1,000-yard receiver? Like, what are you doing here? And now you're like, oh, okay, $25 million. Like when DK Metcalf's getting 30+ million and you're having to go out and give a 3rd-round pick to get him, and he's 27 already. And, Devonta Smith is a little bit older for when he came out. But, that is one of the things that I think the Eagles, I think the Eagles get a little too much hype on all their void years because they're paying the price already right now.
Yeah.
And I think another underreported story is that they've lost a starting D tackle, a starting DN, a starting safety, a starting linebacker. Like there is real talent coming off that roster.
Cornerback too. Slay's gone too.
It's corner. Yeah.
Who's the linebacker?
I was thinking of the corner in Slay, and I called him a linebacker.
Yeah.
So they've had real, and they lost starting guard Mekhi Becton. At least right now is not back. So they've had real losses. But the one thing they do right is they go in and pay the guy, and what it does is they gave him $20 million signing bonus 2 years before he could get that on top of his deal.
It's like buying out arbitration years.
Yes, it's exactly what it is. It's giving them a bunch of money 2 years early. And this is where, if Clark Hunt wants to keep feeding the beast, it might be, you've got to be a little more liquid, Clark. And if you really want to give your team, he talks about, we don't ever want to be in a spot where we can't compete. We want to continue. Well, if you really want to do that, that means coming up with some cash early. Why not on Trent McDuffie? He's super young for where he is year-wise. To me, that's the answer. And if you know this is what's waiting, if you give it to him now, if you get in the form of a signing bonus and you're just putting 3 years on the back end, number one, you're not putting 29, 30, and you can still get out that much earlier. This is just good business, is to give this kid the raise. And you're doing a solid to the whole team when you go, listen, we know you got screwed on that 5th-year option. So we're going to take care of you now.
Yep.
We're going to give you $30 million now to soften the blow of you only getting $13 million on that 5th-year option. And it's an extension. It's a 3-year extension on the end of the 2 years he's already there. So you give him a big boatload of cash this year. The next year you have him cheap at $13 million, right? And that bonus prorates out, and then that cheapens the cost of him in the later years where theoretically his skills would be coming down. That's the path that the Eagles have shown us that I think.
If you're an agent, if you're Trent McDuffie's agent, Soren, do you have that conversation though?
100%.
See, I think the way the cornerback market is moving this to me is the potential start of the way the wide receiver market moved 2 years ago when Christian Kirk signed his deal, and it raised a lot of eyebrows. I think you potentially, if you're an agent of a cornerback, you can say, this is trending in my direction right now.
I agree. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but that Christian Kirk deal had happened before the Devontae Smith deal happened. The point is getting that money now, in particular with McDuffie, who knows he's getting screwed next year. I think it does open the door to say, listen, you've got to play 2 years.
Yeah. I agree with you that the Chiefs need to have that conversation for sure. Yeah. I'm just asking from the other side, like how willing. I don't think we should assume the willingness on the other side, even if they possibly could.
Agreed. And it might be like, no, listen, I'll ball out for 2 years and then I want the really big payday, because he is going to be young when he hits the market.
Yeah.
So he will be attractive when he gets out there. And I don't think the number is 25 or 30 to get him to do it. I think it's more like 50. And maybe it's paid out over 2 years. That those signing bonuses don't all have to be right up front. They can still be signing bonuses, but you can chunk it down, or even do it as a roster bonus, and you have it. There are ways to do it. The bottom line is, though, giving him a lot more money now to buy out the back end cheaper.
And they basically have him for 3 years too, right? I mean, you've got his 4th year of his rookie deal, 5th-year player option, which is a no-brainer, and then a franchise tag. So you kind of have him for 3 years, and that's part of your persuasion of the player is listen, this is within our control for the next 3 years.
The holdout is within his control, though.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
Well,
that is one of the options.
Yeah, and what Soren's talking about is the timing of it. Like when you get that deal after your 3rd year, you've made all pro, maybe you feel like, I'm getting screwed a little bit with the 5th-year option. Oh, man, you want to give me a new deal? I'd love you feel loved.
Yes. You
start getting to where these guys are 4th, 5th years in the league, and they're looking at what other guys are getting paid. They start getting a little more prickly about, what am I going to get now? And so Devontae Smith is signing that deal in Philadelphia because, the Eagles said, couple 1,000-yard seasons, you're our guy, man. Yeah, go ahead. You're going to be here forever. And he loves that. And that's a big, you mentioned the Eagles. I heard a crazy stat about them. The next 2 years, next 2 drafts, they've got 20 picks. And they only have 3 free agents after this next season. They're in great shape. Like, they can lose players because they can backfill those players with draft picks.
I would stop short of I would hold up before I'd go to great shape, just because part of that the draft pick thing I do love. I'm with you, but on their dead cap situation, they've got some pretty big numbers that they're probably gonna end up carrying over, and that's assuming that everybody stays healthy and they don't add to it. For 26, they've already got $212 million. I'm like, they better have draft picks, and they better not have any free agents, because they're gonna have to cover a draft class and any guys that come off the books, and they've got a bunch of UFAs that are in the depth part of the category. So you're right, they're doing this better than San Francisco did it, but they're still they're feeling some pain now, that they're still a lot tied into the guys that are here. So you better stay pretty healthy if you're gonna not need anybody beyond. But it's a great point,
and they got a replacement for everybody who's leaving. So they are, but again, you have to have the cash to be in that position. You have to be willing to pay up front, which is a big ask for some owners.
And we'll finish with this: the Myles Garrett deal, 4 for $160. Now I'll give the PFF grade: 2nd overall, edge rusher, 2nd overall, pass rusher according to PFF. George Karlaftis, same situation as Trent McDuffie, 1st round pick, 53rd best overall edge rusher, 39th best pass rush edge. What does the Myles Garrett deal, Sam, mean for George Karlaftis?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say nothing because I do think, positional stuff has trickle down effect, but, I would say close to nothing because he's not going to be compared to that. I look at what the Bills just did with Gregory Rousseau and look at his stats over the 4 years. He had 8 sacks last year, 25 in his first 4 years or 3 years. George Karlaftis, 8 sacks last year, 24 and a half. Their numbers have been almost identical since coming into the league. And so to me, that's the deal I look at. And he just signed 4 for $80 with 54 guaranteed. And I think a lot of people look at, and I am in this boat, and say George Karlaftis is an above average but not great player. But this is the going rate for above average but not great players at that position. And I mean, people are going to get tired of me saying this, but you chose Nick Bolton. You chose to pay, you're going to choose to pay Trey Smith. This is going to start to be the repercussions of those decisions. Having said that, Juwan Taylor comes off the books, after this next year, you'll probably save $20 million on the cap then. They'll have ways to try and finagle this. Some of it is going to depend on Clark Hunt's willingness to keep kicking the can down the road with the Patrick Mahomes thing.
But all those things like Juwan Taylor only matter if you have an in-house replacement who's cheap.
Yeah, you've got to have a right. You've got to have a right tackle.
Yeah.
That could be something you're searching for in free agency all of a sudden once Juwan Taylor's gone. So, my point is, all of this stuff has repercussions, and I look at actually George Karlaftis as the number one example of something that I say, how are they going to bring that guy back based on what they just did this last offseason with paying Nick Bolton and choosing to give Trey Smith a long-term deal, which is still, something they're negotiating toward.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. And this is the same thing, Jeff, where we talk about you give him that deal now, give him the money up front. It's a lot of money now. It's sooner than you'd have to give it to him, but it'll be less than you'd give him if you sit it out and wait 4 years or 5 years. Rousseau got it after 4. He was a first-round pick as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they had, they bought through the 5th-year option. So it's either this year or next. But I mean, this is where I Trey Smith, Nick Bolton waiting till they're about ready to step into the open market. You've got to beat the open market price. I think we would all agree if you're keeping those guys, it either needs to get done this year, which is what I would be in favor of, or you have to get it done next year and not have them have their toe in the water of free agency and have to rebut the price that the open market would give them.
Yeah. I don't think Karlaftis is going to be here now. And I think that's partly because of the way the market's going, but also because I don't think the money's going to add up. I think they're going to have other needs in other expensive areas. Chris Jones's deal is going to be coming down. He'd have 2 years left on his deal when Karlaftis is officially free, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a couple of really expensive years on the back end to where I don't know if they'll keep that or not.
Exactly. So I don't know how that's going to play out. But yeah, I mean, Karlaftis is in that weird spot of not a great player, but the market for his position is really strong. I could easily see them or him feeling like I can go make more money elsewhere and then I'm out of here. And so I think Karlaftis is probably going to be a casualty of all this stuff, all this accounting. And it would not surprise me if they went and found somebody in the next couple of years to be his replacement.
Well, I mean, this is the draft to potentially find a replacement for Karlaftis, and this is where the Chiefs deserve some credit. Is some of their free agents that they were able to walk on is because they drafted a year early for those guys. They drafted Jaden Hicks a year ago, which allowed them to walk from Justin Reed, and they've done that over the years too. So this is a year to me to where we mentioned it a lot. It's a strong defensive line class, more interior than the edge, but there still are going to be some good edges available, as late as 31 in the draft, in which case, if you do it well, a year from now, you can recoup some assets for George Karlaftis with him having the 5th-year player option to where potentially you're talking about, getting a, I don't know, 2nd-round pick or something for George Karlaftis if you do it right.
Yeah. By the way, George Karlaftis is not even 24 years old. I mean, he's 3 years in, but he's going to be another one of these guys that's young. And those
drafts young. Yeah.
Yeah. They do that. They prioritize that. And I talk about it all the time. Like you see these free agent boards, top 25 free agents, DeAndre Hopkins, 17. It's like, no, Their 32-year-olds are not in the top 15 of anybody's free agent board. They want youth. They want guys who are going to have their legs. So stop putting 31 and 33. Odell Beckham Jr. was like a top 10 free agent for like 10 years, it felt like. Like, no, he's not. Stop. That's not how this game works. And so Karlaftis will have a big market, and his agent will know, because if you get him even after 2 years, I mean, at this point, he'd be sitting out there. He'll be 25. Same thing that Nick Bolton was, same thing that Trey Smith was. And you saw that they clearly paid those prices, put the tag on, because they knew there was going to be a big, vast market for those guys. It's the same thing. And if I look up McDuffie, I know he was youthful as well. So, he's right about the same age. So
hey, they just don't look at what the Myles Garretts get. They look at what the Tershawn Whartons get in the world get.
Yes. For sure. McDuffie is 24. He'll be 25 in September. So 2 years from now, he would be 26, sitting at the same time, and would be very much coveted. So you might as well get it done. All right, that's going to get it done for us. Remember, we're always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. One contractor, all things parking lot. That's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. And if you have a case, if you've been hurt in an accident, why not call our friends at Northland Injury Law? Google 5-star rated personal injury lawyers, voted Kansas City's best. Number 1 accident lawyers. Text HURT to 22222. That's HURT to 22222, or call 816-400-HURT. And our friends at Besame Wellness, use promo code podcast25 to save 25% on your entire order. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.